10 years of my life, gone in a single meeting. All because she was younger. Stick with me while I share my story, and if it touches you, don't forget to support our channel by hitting that subscribe button, dropping a like, and sharing it with the people you care about. Emily Turner had poured her heart and soul into Hamilton and Company, marketing for a decade. She remembered the first day she walked through those glass doors as a nervous 22-year-old, dreaming of building a career she could be proud of. Over the years, she had grown with the company, learning every department inside out, solving problems no one else dared touch, and guiding the team through some of their toughest campaigns. She wasn't just an employee. She was the backbone of the office, the one people turned to when things went wrong. Greg Hamilton had always seemed like a mentor to her. He was demanding, yes, but Emily respected him and believed in his vision. She often stayed late, fixing mistakes that weren't hers, covering for colleagues who failed, and even taking responsibility for decisions she hadn't made. She never complained because she wanted to be indispensable. And she was. Or at least she thought she was. Things started to shift when Chloe Martin joined the company. Chloe was everything Emily wasn't. Young, flashy, confident, and immediately noticed by Greg. At first, Emily tried to be welcoming. She showed Chloe the ropes, explained client preferences, and shared strategies that had taken Emily years to master. She thought mentoring someone else might even reflect well on her. But soon, Emily noticed subtle changes. Meetings she used to lead were now Chloe's territory. Clients who had always asked for her attention were suddenly requesting Chloe. Even the casual praise Emily once received from Greg started to fade. Emily felt uneasy, but she told herself not to overreact. Maybe it was just a new perspective, a temporary shift. But then came the quarterly meeting that changed everything. Greg introduced Chloe as the new senior project manager. Her title, her responsibilities. Everything Emily had built and earned for 10 years had been handed to someone else. The applause around her felt hollow. Greg didn't even look her in the eye. She could feel the weight of disbelief, shock, and betrayal pressing down on her chest. That night, Emily sat alone in her apartment, staring at the walls, trying to process what had happened. 10 years of loyalty, sacrifice, and hard work reduced to nothing more than a stepping stone for someone young. Anger bubbled inside her, but so did a strange clarity. For the first time in years, she realized that no matter how much she gave, some people would take it for granted. She couldn't change Greg or Chloe, but she could change her own path. As she packed her things quietly the next morning, she made a silent vow. This wasn't the end, it was a turning point. Whatever came next, Emily knew she would rise again, stronger and smarter than before. She might have lost her position, but she hadn't lost herself. And that, she decided, would be her greatest power. Emily Turner had earned a reputation at Hamilton and Company as the person who could fix anything. Whenever a project went off track or a client threatened to walk away, she was the first to step in. Late nights at the office, unexpected weekend calls, last-minute presentations. Emily handled it all without complaint. She didn't do it for recognition. She did it because she cared about the work and believed in the company. Over the years, Emily had trained countless new hires. She showed them the ropes, explained the nuances of clients, and guided them through the mistakes she had made in her early days. She knew that the company's success depended on teamwork, and she made sure everyone was prepared to deliver. Even when Greg made decisions that caused problems, Emily quietly picked up the pieces, ensuring that nothing fell apart. She carried the weight of the company's failures on her shoulders so that the team could keep moving forward. Her co-workers respected her deeply. They knew she was dependable, honest, and fair. Many came to her for advice on managing clients, handling office politics, or even dealing with personal struggles. Emily always listened, always offered guidance, and always stayed calm under pressure. She had built a quiet authority in the office, one that came from her work ethic and her dedication. But despite all of this, Greg's treatment of her was different. While he praised her occasionally, he often assumed she would handle everything without question. "You're the backbone of this company, Emily," he would say with a smile. Emily believed him. She took pride in the trust he appeared to place in her, thinking it was a sign of appreciation. In reality, it was a subtle way to rely on her without truly valuing her contribution. Emily didn't complain. She thought loyalty and hard work would be enough. She believed that as long as she continued giving her best, Greg and the company would recognize her worth. And for years it had worked, at least on the surface. She was rewarded with small promotions, bonuses, and occasional praise. But deep down, Emily often felt invisible, as if her long hours and sacrifices were taken for granted. Still, she persisted. She loved the work, loved helping clients succeed, and loved seeing her team grow. Every campaign she managed, every challenge she overcame, reinforced her belief that dedication mattered. Emily didn't realize that her loyalty, her willingness to do everything, was being quietly tested. The stage was being set for a betrayal that she could never have imagined, and her decade of dedication, while admirable, would soon be met with a lesson she would never forget. Emily continued each day with quiet determination, unaware that the comfort of her role and the trust she had in Greg were about to be shattered in ways she hadn't anticipated. Chloe Martin arrived at Hamilton and Company one bright Monday morning. She was 25, freshly graduated, and carried herself with a confidence that immediately caught people's attention. Her designer heels clicked across the polished floors, and her smile seemed to light up every room she entered. Greg introduced her to the team, explaining that she would shadow Emily and bring some youthful energy to the office. Emily greeted her warmly. She remembered what it was like to be new and nervous, and she wanted Chloe to feel welcome. She spent hours showing her how to manage clients, how to navigate tricky situations, and even how to calm panicked team members when projects went wrong. Emily tried to treat her as a colleague and a student at the same time, hoping to help Chloe succeed. At first, everything seemed fine. Chloe asked questions, took notes, and even complimented Emily on her work. Emily felt proud, thinking that mentoring her might be rewarding for both of them. She continued to dedicate extra time, making sure Chloe understood every part of the job, from scheduling meetings to drafting proposals. But slowly, Emily began to notice changes. Chloe started attending meetings without Emily's knowledge and asking questions that seemed calculated to impress Greg. Important clients who had always relied on Emily began reaching out to Chloe for updates or advice. It was subtle at first, small gestures that Emily tried to ignore, thinking maybe she was overreacting. Then came the first major meeting where Emily was supposed to lead. She arrived prepared, with notes and strategies carefully planned, only to find Chloe sitting at the head of the table. Greg smiled at Chloe and nodded, and for the first time in 10 years, Emily felt out of place in a room she had practically owned. Chloe spoke confidently, offering ideas that Greg immediately praised, while Emily's suggestions were barely acknowledged. Emily tried to stay professional, answering questions and guiding the conversation, but the shift was undeniable. She felt a pit in her stomach as she realized the dynamic had changed. Chloe wasn't just learning from her anymore. She was being positioned to take over. Clients, co-workers, even Greg himself were beginning to look at Chloe as the go-to person. The tension in Emily's chest grew over the following weeks. Every meeting she had led for years now included Chloe, often overshadowing her contributions. Every compliment from Greg seemed directed more at Chloe than at her. Emily found herself questioning her role in the company, wondering if all her years of hard work were about to be sidelined. Despite this, Emily kept her composure. She continued helping Chloe, continuing to manage campaigns and handling crises like always. But the unease lingered. She had always believed loyalty and experience mattered, yet here was a younger, newer employee quietly edging into the position Emily had earned over a decade. The realization hit her slowly but sharply. Chloe wasn't just a trainee. She was a replacement in the making, and Emily was just beginning to see the first signs of a betrayal that would change everything she had worked for. Emily tried to ignore the small signs at first. She told herself she was imagining things when meetings she used to lead were now taken over by Chloe. She convinced herself that her experience still mattered and that her hard work would eventually speak for itself. But one afternoon, she couldn't ignore it any longer. She had stayed late at the office, finishing a report for an important client. As she passed the glass-walled conference room, she heard laughter and voices. She paused, trying to ignore it, but then she realized she could hear them clearly. Greg and Chloe were inside, talking about her. "Emily's great, but she's old school," Greg said, his voice casual, almost dismissive. Chloe laughed softly. "I can modernize things for you." Emily's heart sank. She stepped back quietly, unable to breathe for a moment. 10 years of loyalty, 10 years of late nights, 10 years of covering mistakes and handling crises. All of it reduced to a casual comment in a private joke between her boss and the young woman she had trained. She felt like a fool, like everything she had worked for had been taken for granted. When she finally got into her car, the weight of it hit her fully. She buried her face in her hands and cried, letting the tears flow freely. The streets around her blurred as she tried to collect herself. She had always thought loyalty and hard work were enough, that dedication would earn respect and security. Now, she realized that those same years of devotion had made her invisible, replaceable, and underestimated. She thought about the projects she had saved, the clients she had won, and the crises she had managed without anyone noticing. And yet, here she was, feeling powerless while someone with less experience and understanding of the company was being groomed to take her place. The realization was bitter and painful, like a knife twisting in her chest. Emily felt a mix of anger, sadness, and disbelief. How could someone she had trusted so much disregard her like this? How could Greg, the man she had treated almost like family, dismiss her contributions in such a cold and thoughtless way. And Chloe, the one she had helped and welcomed, was now part of this betrayal. Sitting in her car, she stared out the windshield, thinking about the future. She knew she had a choice: to let this break her, or to find a way to rise above it. The thought of revenge flickered in her mind, not the kind that involved bitterness or spite, but a plan to reclaim her worth and prove that years of loyalty and hard work could never be erased. That night, Emily made a silent promise to herself. She wouldn't let this betrayal define her. She wouldn't stay in a place where she was undervalued. And she wouldn't let anyone else, no matter how charming or young, take what she had built. The tears ran dry, and a cold clarity settled in. This was just the beginning of a fight she was determined to win. The quarterly meeting started like any other, with clients and team members gathered in the sleek conference room, notebooks open and laptops ready. Emily sat quietly, trying to focus on the agenda, though her mind was still heavy from the conversation she had overheard the night before. She tried to convince herself it was just another day, but a nagging feeling in her chest told her something was about to change. Greg stepped up to the podium, smiling broadly as he began speaking about exciting changes for the company. At first, his words seemed routine, about targets, new strategies, and growth. Then came the part Emily had feared but never fully imagined. And to help us move in this new direction, Greg said, pausing with a dramatic smile, I'd like to introduce Chloe Martin as our new senior project manager. Her fresh ideas and modern approach will lead our team forward. Emily froze. Her title, her projects, her position, all handed to someone else with a smile and applause. She could feel her pulse racing, her hands tightening around her notebook. Around the room, people clapped politely, unsure of where to look or how to react. Some glanced at Emily, sensing her shock, but no one spoke. Greg glanced at her, and for a moment their eyes met, but he quickly looked away, avoiding her gaze entirely. Emily's stomach sank. She had spent a decade building her career, dedicating herself to this company, and now, in one public announcement, it was all stripped away. She had been replaced, and the person who had benefited from her guidance and mentoring was now in her chair. Chloe smiled, radiating confidence, and accepted congratulations from the team. She had no idea the weight of what she had just inherited. Emily could see the excitement in her eyes, the pride she felt stepping into a role that wasn't truly hers, yet came easily. It was cruel how effortless it looked, and Emily felt a mix of anger, disbelief, and sorrow all at once. The rest of the meeting continued, but Emily's mind was elsewhere. Every plan she had prepared, every insight she had intended to share, now felt meaningless. Her contributions, her efforts, everything she had poured into the company over 10 years, seemed invisible. Greg's words and actions made it clear. Loyalty and hard work weren't enough. They didn't guarantee respect, security, or recognition. When the meeting finally ended, Emily left without a word. She packed her bag slowly, methodically, as though every movement was helping her regain some control. She refused to argue or plead. There was no point. The damage had been done, and the betrayal was complete. Sitting in her car afterward, the reality hit harder than ever. For the first time, Emily truly understood that she could no longer rely on Greg's promises or the company's supposed loyalty. But as the initial sting of humiliation settled, a new determination began to rise inside her. She wasn't going to crumble under this betrayal. Instead, she would find a way to turn this ultimate blow into the force that would drive her next chapter, one where she was in control, valued, and unstoppable. Emily packed her things quietly the next morning, moving slowly as if each item in her hands reminded her of years she had poured into the company. She didn't say goodbye to anyone. There were no speeches, no dramatic farewell. She didn't want to give them the satisfaction of seeing her upset. She only wanted to leave with her dignity intact. Greg appeared at her desk while she was tucking the last of her personal items into her bag. He looked at her with a casual expression and said, "It's just business, Em." His words were cold, dismissive, and empty. Emily nodded politely, forcing a small smile, but inside a storm was building. As she walked through the office one last time, she noticed the familiar sights: the polished conference table, the framed awards on the wall, the clutter of sticky notes on her old desk. Everything looked the same, yet nothing felt familiar anymore. She realized that in all her years of loyalty and hard work, the people she had trusted had failed to see her value until it was too late. By the time she reached her car, the initial sting of betrayal had turned into a sharp clarity. 10 years of late nights, missed weekends, and endless problem-solving had directly contributed to the company's success. She had won over clients, rescued failing campaigns, and held the team together through crises. Every dollar the company had earned, every praise it received, had been built on her effort. And now, they had thrown her aside as if she were replaceable. Sitting behind the wheel, Emily took a deep breath. The anger and hurt that had been simmering inside her for weeks were now joined by a hard determination. She realized she couldn't control Greg, Chloe, or the company's decisions, but she could control herself, her actions, and her future. For the first time, she began to see the betrayal not just as a loss, but as a turning point. They had underestimated her, assumed she would accept being discarded quietly, and thought they could erase a decade of her contributions. But they had misjudged her. That moment in her car became a silent promise. She would not be defeated, and she would not settle for being undervalued. As she drove away from Hamilton and Company, the familiar skyline of the city passed by, but Emily saw it differently now. Every mile seemed to strip away the weight of the years she had given them and replace it with a sense of freedom she hadn't felt in a long time. The company might have taken her position, but they hadn't taken her skills, her experience, or her resolve. By the time she reached home, Emily's sorrow had turned into something sharper, something stronger. She was hurt, yes, but she was also clear-eyed and ready. The betrayal had lit a fire inside her. She understood now that her loyalty had been taken for granted, but that same loyalty and hard work could be redirected toward herself, toward building something that no one could take away. This was her breaking point, but also the beginning of a path she would control entirely. About a month after leaving Hamilton and Company, Emily received an unexpected call from Linda Parker, a client she had worked with closely for years. Linda's voice was warm but direct. "Greg's lost his touch," she said. "Would you consider freelancing for us?" Emily felt a spark of hope. After everything that had happened, here was someone who still believed in her skills and her dedication. She agreed to take on a small project, just to test the waters. At first, it was nerve-wracking. She hadn't run her own work independently in years. But as soon as she dove in, everything clicked. The client was thrilled with her ideas, her attention to detail, and the way she managed the project with confidence and efficiency. Emily felt a rush of pride she hadn't experienced since before Chloe arrived and Greg had betrayed her. Word started to spread quietly. Another client reached out, having heard from Linda about Emily's work. Then another. Slowly, Emily began to piece together a small but growing list of contracts. Each one was a chance to prove herself again, and each one reminded her of what she was truly capable of when her talent and effort were respected. Emily realized she needed help, so she began hiring a small team of people she trusted, former colleagues, friends from the industry, and talented newcomers who shared her vision. She wanted a team that would work with loyalty, respect, and mutual support, rather than the cold hierarchy she had experienced before. Together, they started tackling bigger projects, and Emily's reputation grew. Clients appreciated her honesty, her dedication, and the way she treated them like partners rather than numbers on a spreadsheet. With each successful campaign, Emily gained confidence. She was no longer dependent on Greg or Hamilton and Company. She was her own boss, calling the shots, and creating a work environment where talent was valued and people felt motivated. The freedom was intoxicating, and the satisfaction of building something from the ground up was unlike anything she had felt before. Emily's small start had grown into a full-fledged business. She had her own office space, her own clients, and a team she trusted implicitly. Projects came in faster than she could have imagined, and her business flourished. She was no longer just a project manager or a loyal employee. She had become a leader, a creator, and someone people turned to for guidance. The experience of being betrayed and replaced, which had once felt devastating, now served as fuel for her success. Emily understood that losing Hamilton and Company had been painful but necessary. It had pushed her to take control of her own career, to show the world her worth, and to build something that could never be taken from her. From the ashes of her past, Emily had risen stronger, wiser, and more determined than ever. Hamilton and Company, once a strong and respected marketing firm, began to show cracks not long after Emily left. Chloe, though confident and ambitious, lacked the experience and judgment Emily had spent years developing. Small mistakes started to pile up, and clients who had relied on Emily's steady guidance began to note. Campaigns missed deadlines, strategies fell flat, and key accounts started slipping away. Greg tried to intervene, but it was too little too late. He was used to leaning on Emily to fix everything, and now there was no one with her expertise to step in. Panic set in as he realized the company's reputation was at risk. Employees whispered in the hallways about lost clients and mounting problems, but no one dared say it directly to Greg. Rumors began circulating that Greg had reached out to Emily privately, hoping she would return to save the projects she had once managed effortlessly. Some co-workers even joked quietly that Hamilton and Company had built their success entirely on Emily's hard work. But when the call or email came, Emily didn't respond. She didn't even acknowledge it. She had no interest in being dragged back into the chaos she had escaped. Instead, she focused on her own business, Turner Creative, and her growing team. Each project she completed successfully reinforced her belief that leaving had been the right choice. She watched as her former clients, one by one, turned to her for new campaigns, drawn by the professionalism, honesty, and skill she had always shown. Meanwhile, Greg's frustration grew. Chloe struggled to handle difficult clients, missed opportunities, and didn't understand the subtle negotiations that Emily had mastered. Each mistake reflected poorly on the company, and Greg began to feel the consequences of having underestimated Emily's value. He had assumed loyalty and experience could be replaced with charm and youth, but the results proved otherwise. Emily didn't gloat or announce her success. She simply continued building her reputation. The satisfaction of watching Hamilton and company falter without her was quiet but real. It wasn't revenge in the traditional sense, but a form of justice that didn't require her intervention, karma unfolding naturally. She had learned a vital lesson. Her time, effort, and skills were invaluable, and anyone who failed to recognize that would eventually face the consequences. Greg and Chloe's struggles were not her responsibility, and she had no desire to help them. The company that had dismissed her loyalty was now struggling under its own mistakes, and Emily watched from the outside, calm and confident, knowing she had made the right choice by taking control of her own career. As weeks passed, Hamilton and Company's decline became more obvious. Clients left for competitors, campaigns fell apart, and Greg's decisions seemed increasingly desperate. Meanwhile, Emily and her team grew stronger, securing new contracts and establishing a reputation built on competence, trust, and integrity. It was a stark contrast, and proof that loyalty, skill, and experience cannot be replaced by ambition alone. A year had passed since Emily left Hamilton and Company, and Turner Creative had grown steadily into a respected and successful marketing firm. Emily's reputation for honesty, skill, and dedication had spread far beyond her old network, and clients sought her out for projects they trusted would be handled flawlessly. Her team had expanded, and they had started winning high-profile contracts that once seemed out of reach. One evening, Turner Creative was invited to an industry awards gala. Emily had been nominated for the Excellence in Marketing Leadership Award, an honor that recognized both her creativity and the results she had achieved with her. As she arrived at the gala, she scanned the room, noting the usual faces of competitors and clients. Then she noticed something that made her pause. Greg and Chloe were seated at a small table in the back, almost hidden from view. Greg looked uneasy, while Chloe's confident smile seemed slightly forced. It struck Emily how little attention they were receiving in a room filled with industry professionals, many of whom had already heard of her recent successes. When it was time to announce the award, Emily walked confidently to the stage. The applause was warm, genuine, and filled her with a sense of satisfaction she hadn't felt in years. She held the award in her hands, glanced out over the audience, and for a moment, her eyes landed on Greg and Chloe. The sight of them, quietly sitting in the back, reminded her of everything she had endured, the betrayal, the loss, and the feeling of being undervalued. Taking a deep breath, Emily addressed the crowd. "Loyalty should never be mistaken for weakness," she said, her voice steady and clear. "Some of us build empires quietly, until the world finally notices." Her words carried the weight of her journey, the lessons she had learned, and the pride she now felt in her achievements. The applause grew louder, and Emily felt a surge of confidence. She had not needed to confront Greg or Chloe directly, nor had she wasted energy trying to prove herself to them. Her success was visible for everyone to see, and that alone was the sweetest form of revenge. It was proof that dedication, intelligence, and hard work could not be erased, no matter how much someone tried to dismiss it. As she stepped down from the stage, clients and colleagues came up to congratulate her. She smiled, thanked them, and shared a few words with her team, knowing that their collective effort had made this possible. Meanwhile, Greg and Chloe remained in the back, unnoticed by most of the room, a stark contrast to the recognition and respect Emily now commanded. That night, as she left the gala, Emily felt a deep sense of closure. She had risen from betrayal stronger than ever, proving that her value could not be taken away. The award wasn't just a recognition of her work. It was a symbol of resilience, determination, and the quiet power of someone who refused to be underestimated. For Emily, that moment marked the triumph of skill and perseverance over injustice and betrayal. Months after the gala, Emily's life had settled into a rhythm that felt both rewarding and empowering. Turner Creative had grown into a respected firm with a strong client base, and her team was thriving under her leadership. Emily spent her days managing projects, mentoring young women entering the marketing field, and guiding her team with the same care and attention she had once given clients. But now she did it on her own terms, without fear of being undervalued or replaced. She often thought back to the months she had spent at Hamilton and Company, to the way Greg and Chloe had dismissed her contributions and treated her loyalty as something to exploit. The memories stung at first, but over time, they had become lessons, proof of her strength and resilience. Emily realized that the betrayal, painful as it was, had forced her to step out of the shadows and take control of her career. Without it, she might never have built her own business or discovered her full potential. Emily reflected on how far she had come. She remembered the first calls from clients like Linda Parker, the small contracts she had taken on hesitantly at first, and the quiet satisfaction she had felt after each successful project. Each milestone had reinforced her belief that she was capable of far more than anyone at her old company had recognized. She had transformed her frustration and anger into determination, using it to fuel her growth instead of letting it destroy her. The experience also gave Emily a deeper understanding of loyalty and trust. She knew now that being loyal didn't mean being blind or allowing others to take advantage of you. True loyalty was valuable, but it had to be paired with self-respect and boundaries. She made it a point to teach this lesson to the women she mentored, encouraging them to recognize their own worth and never settle for environments that failed to appreciate them. Looking back, Emily often repeated the thought that had become her personal mantra. They took advantage of my loyalty, but in the end, they gave me the push I needed to build something of my own. It reminded her that setbacks could become opportunities, and that betrayal, while painful, could lead to growth and empowerment if approached with clarity and determination. Emily's message was simple but powerful. She wanted others to understand that loyalty is not weakness. Being dedicated, hardworking, and reliable should never be mistaken for naivety or a willingness to be mistreated. Her journey showed that even when people betray you or take you for granted, you can rise stronger, reclaim your power, and create something lasting. As she sat in her office overlooking the city skyline, surrounded by a team she trusted and clients who valued her expertise, Emily felt a profound sense of peace. She had turned what once felt like the end of the world into a new beginning. Her story wasn't just about revenge. It was about resilience, self-respect, and the courage to take control of her own destiny. And she knew that message would stay with her, guiding every decision